Welcome, Amplify You family. Michelle Abraham here. I am super excited to bring you yet another amazing guest today for you to enjoy. I have David Greer with me here. David is a long-time entrepreneur, over 35 years of business experience. He's an entrepreneurial coach. David has done some incredible things with his business. He is also the author of Wind in Your Sails, which is an amazing book that I've been looking at over the last few weeks, and it's vital strategies that accelerate your entrepreneurial growth. So basically, David's taken his 35 years of business experience, distilled it down, and really made sure that we're not going to make the same mistakes that he did and other people. Just really, really concrete, solid strategies for our business. So David, welcome to the show today, and thanks for being here with us today.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. And David, we decided today to talk about something that is happening in our world, outside the world, and, liking to keep the topics on a longevity basis. So we're not specifically talking about current events today, but we are going to talk about leadership in a crisis situation. So things are happening in our outside world in the current events right now. And although we're not going to dive into the details of that, we want to kind of let our entrepreneurs know what are some things that they can do to help prepare for things that happen outside of their control in the world of business.
So in times of crisis, things are rapidly changing all around us, and there's nothing we can do about that. But we're still the leaders of our company. And especially for those of you who have people who work for you, everyone is going to be looking to you as the business owner, as the entrepreneur, for your leadership. So this is a time for you to come from a place of being really grounded, irregardless of how fearful you are of the business. You want to try and show up with at least some positivity, and also to be authentic. Like, it's okay to be afraid. And I think you need to share that with your employees. And ultimately, I write about in Wind in Your Sails, leaders set the tone. Mm-hmm. So, however you show up is how people are going to respond. And so I think that's important every single day. If you actually have a bad drive into the office and you're mad at a lot of people and you come into the office that way, my experience is people will think the business is failing. Mm-hmm. Like, you just had a bad drive. And of course, today, with the things that are happening in our world, it would be very easy to show up like you had something way worse than a bad drive. And so it takes conscious intention and thought to show up differently. So
that's right.
That's kind of one of the first things, is leaders set the tone.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, because, however, so much is on the leader's plate always. It's always important for us to rise above that and really exhume the leadership qualities that we would like to see in other leaders ourselves. And I think that's something that, amidst the many crazy things of happening in either your business or your world, or a combination of both, or like you said, the drive in. I think that's so important to keep that in mind when you're a leader. And for us leaders who are podcasters too, I think now is the time to rise up and really speak to your audience and be a calm ground for people to hear your voice and listen to what you have to say, and really just be the leader that you want to see in other people too. That's super important right now.
And then in the bigger picture, I was reading some recommendations from another author leader that I know of, Vern Harnish. He has a couple books, Rockefeller Habits and Scaling Up. And his number one thing, when he's interviewed a number of CEOs in the last week, and it's communication. Like, that's the thing that employees are looking for. Mm-hmm. Is, even if you don't know, if you're telling them you don't know, at least they're hearing from you, and it's not all about, just kind of big empty space. And his recommendation was that you're communicating with people at least once a day. Mm-hmm. In this kind of situation, to even twice a day. Because events are just changing at such a speed, that people just need to and want to hear more.
Yeah, or hear from you too. Like, and I think people, I think in their minds are going to worst case scenarios, like they're going to be laid off, the business is closing, we're not doing well. And I think I think that communication is so important, so them to feel a little bit reassured about their current working situations too.
Yeah, and again, in the middle of this, you may not know what exactly, like how many people you're having to lay off. I certainly wouldn't want to be a CEO of an airline at the moment, which I think is an incredibly tough job in the best of times.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to communicate as best you know what's going on in the moment, and just keep people informed as best you can, because if you don't tell them, then they'll just always assume the worst.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's up to you to keep that communication. And even in good times, I'm a believer in entrepreneurs like sending out a weekly email update
Mm-hmm.
to all employees. It is easy, you know, when you're the entrepreneur, you are like the biggest lever in the business. So little tiny motions that you make have these totally disproportionate kind of stirring of the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
if you like, you know, 2 or 3 levels down below you. Or even if, you know, one of my most successful companies was only 20 people, but even then, a lot of them were remote. It's so easy to not be staying in touch, and for people to not be feeling that they're part of the whole. So even in regular times, I recommend like sending a weekly update against your plans for the quarter and where you are, and any other like key pieces of information for the week.
That's a great strategy. And for some companies, they're having to pivot to remote working these days. As the CEO or the entrepreneur at the head of the wheel of the ship, what do you suggest are some other strategies that we can do to really make sure that our team is all on board and working together from a remote locations?
I think that especially for people who have not regularly worked remotely, I think there's the whole social isolation piece, that people are not, they're not used to being by themselves. They're used to that social interaction. So as a leader, and as an entrepreneur, I think you have to find ways. So for your first reports, that means like talking to every person on the phone once a day. And then for all the people who report to them, they're talking on the phone once a day. And, you know, I think you need to encourage people to be spending maybe a little more time actually on the phone or video conferencing together, even at possibly the expense of some lost productivity. But it's more important to keep the teamwork together and to keep the feeling of camaraderie together.
Mm-hmm.
And so you probably will actually need to set some rules around that and then monitor it. Like folks, I really want you to actually talk to each other.
Yeah.
Like, because I believe this is how you're going to stay healthy and well, and this is how we're going to get through it together.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. And I thank goodness for technologies like Zoom these days. Like I heard the CEO of Zoom actually just opened up his platform free to schools and education that were shut down during this time, that they could use Zoom to communicate with their classrooms, which I think that was a great idea. So thank goodness we have the technology now to be able to communicate with our teams in a remote setting. I remember I was so excited to get to work from home and get working from home. And after a few months of working at home, you know, like you slowly like deteriorate yourself, like confidence, like you decided, you don't even get dressed anymore. You just go right to your work in your pajamas. And like, there's something to be said from like having to get up, get dressed, get ready for work, even if it is just at your kitchen table. It's just that, you know, you feel more productive in the day and you feel better about yourself too. Working from home sometimes can have that isolating effect on you. So that's a great to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I've worked at home pretty much continuously since 1982.
Mm.
And, you know, kind of worked remotely and virtually long before it was kind of a thing, and long before we had video chat, I'll say that.
Yeah.
And I can't, just what you said is really important, is to establish routines that work for you.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, getting up at the same time, moving into work mode at the same time, dressing appropriately, like maybe you dress a little less, more casual than you would if you were going into the office, but you still want to be in work mode. There's also a flip side to that I think is very important, if you're in a family situation, is you need to help your family understand when you are in work mode.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to understand it's like you've gone to the office. Like, no, you can't interrupt me at any time, right? Like when I come out of the office, ask me and maybe I can be interrupted. And I will take a break, mid-morning or mid-afternoon and for lunch when we can talk. But otherwise, I'm working.
Mm-hmm.
And because, I found that it's very helpful if you can find a room to go work in where you can close the door.
Mm-hmm.
I know it sounds like crazy, but when you're at the kitchen table and the family is at home,
Yeah.
it's very hard for them to not like interrupt you. Or if you have younger children, like when we earlier in my life, I traveled by sailboat while homeschooling our kids, and you'd be working and they wanted to step on the chair and look over your shoulder and see what you're doing
Yeah.
because they're curious,
Yeah.
and you kind of want to share that. It's like bringing your children to work day, but it's every day, and
Yeah.
you need to have boundaries around that. So that's a really important piece just in general about working at home.
Yeah, definitely recognizing that these days with the schools on spring break or like closures and like everyone's home and like even recording, even just, you saw right before this, I was like, hey guys, I'm recording. Shh. It makes it really challenging. At the same time, it's so nice to have, I feel like a little bit of a break where we have more family time too. Like we are closer as a family. And so even though it is those breaks when I'm coming in and out of the room, I still get to see them more than I would if I was working from the office. So I think I cherish that. I do think that is a great thing. The great thing to have. However, the productivity has definitely gone downhill.
So if we come back to kind of crisis management, whether the crisis is like something drastic has happened, you've lost one of your key customers,
Mm-hmm.
or right now we're in a global pandemic, so we have a really undefined external crisis that we're dealing with. So the first piece I think for as an entrepreneur is you do have to slow down and stop. It's not business as usual, and you need to stabilize your environment. And stabilize it using the best knowledge that you have on the day, whether your plans should be completely impacted or not. I was talking to an entrepreneur yesterday. Their client is in the construction business in the US. This is one of their clients who is 75% of their revenue. And their client had already warned them that they're estimating their business will be down 50% over the next year. And so, the CEO, the entrepreneur was like, okay, so we're going to be 75%, we're going to be half of that. But it turns out, he talked yesterday to the CEO of the company who said, the work we're doing with you is so strategically important to us. And we know that as soon as we have an upturn, we need to have this totally turned on and dialed in, and we're not cutting you back at all.
Right.
So again, it's easy to get into that negative, everything will be bad. And if it is bad, a lot of coaching I do with entrepreneurs, I say you have to face the brutal facts. And that's really tough. But I would say 50% of my work with entrepreneurs is getting the brutal facts on the table. Because once they're there, you actually can do something about it. But when you're hiding from it, you're just trying to treat symptoms and trying to work around it. And so you do have to face those brutal facts, but do take the time to actually find out whether they're true. Like this entrepreneur had already gone to the worst, worst case scenario that, he probably should have spent a little bit of time thinking about, because he might lose all the 25% of the rest of his revenue. But it wasn't the actual brutal fact. The facts changed. And so, this time is a time to stabilize, figure out how to get to the end of the quarter, which is only a couple weeks, and maybe a little bit beyond that. And I'm a big believer in quarterly planning. And 13 weeks is what an actual quarter is. 13 weeks is enough time to get a lot of stuff done. And it's enough time then to reprioritize if you have a rhythm of regular planning. So in this time of stabilization, I think you also need to revisit your plans probably every week and see whether you're on track, whether things are changing. And then as soon as you have any more visibility, out of that, you want to again reset and figure out your top 4 or 5 priorities for the next 13 weeks.
Yeah, and those priorities going into the next quarter, maybe do you see a lot of your businesses that you work with pivoting to maybe meet the new demands of things that are going on, or like not be a service that people are canceling, or like, I mean, for business coaches, we might see the ripple down effect soon. Whereas we are essential for businesses as coaches, but sometimes that might be one of the first things that they let go. Have you seen any sort of those kind of movements in the businesses you work with?
There's no, I mean, I'd say the ones I'm working with have, they're fortunate. They have very deep pockets.
Mm-hmm.
They're fairly well funded, and
Mm-hmm.
they're working on longer strategic plans.
Mm-hmm.
And so this may give them a little more runway and like to go invent the next thing that they're in the middle of inventing,
Mm-hmm.
which would be a bonus. But I don't see it really fundamentally changing their plans, except for, people having to work at home when it's an environment where you need to they work, like I have one client has a lot of physical prototyping machinery.
Mm-hmm.
So people need to actually be there to physically work the machinery. And so their timelines might fall behind because people have to work at home. But I don't see their markets, like what they're trying to build for and where they see their markets going.
Mm-hmm.
So far, I don't think that's going to change just because of the nature of what they're going after. But that's just some of my clients. Again, it's so situational
Mm-hmm.
that you have to take it. Like some business coaches, people are going to be desperate for an extra set of eyes and ears and the outside perspective that we bring.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to cherish that and want to keep us. And others, it's like, I got to just cut everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if it's not absolutely totally mainstream to the business, then, sorry, you have to get cut.
Right.
And if, again, it's situational for each entrepreneur.
Yeah, very much so. We've seen some businesses pivot more towards thinking that how they're going to communicate with their audience now through podcasting. We've had quite a few people this week that have decided that now is the time to get on the platform because they're going to be able to rise up and be the leader that their community needs right now, where this is a good platform for them to be out. So have you noticed any other opportunities in a time of crisis that are arising?
So you've already given, so this is my advice to entrepreneurs. Once you've spent some time thinking about the stabilization,
Mm-hmm.
what you have to do with employees, whether you can keep them employed, whether you have to lay them off. I mean, I don't want to diminish any of these really tough, big decisions.
Those are tough decisions, yeah.
But it's really easy to stay mired in kind of the negativity, the change. And instead, like I remember out of the 2008 crash, the ones who really succeeded were the ones that started looking ahead, started looking around at opportunities. Now, you've already identified 2 on this on our talk today.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one you identified was the Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
So Zoom opened up its platform to all students and educators to have, I think it's free Zoom calls up to 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So think about that from a marketing perspective. You're creating hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of potential future customers
Mm-hmm.
by making this it's a very generous offer. So I've seen the Zoom actually covered in mainstream news media. So, the CEO is clearly taken this idea of let's find a way to leverage this current situation into future opportunities. Whereas what you're seeing, people are going, hey, just a sec, we're not allowed to get together. We,
Mm-hmm.
we can't have more than X number of people together. We can't be more than, 6 feet, 2 meters, close to each other.
Yeah.
So what other platforms and ways do we have to communicate and interact with people? Oh, there's this thing called podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't, right? And it doesn't surprise me that people are reaching out to you who maybe were sitting on the fence or even didn't have any plans for podcasting, but it's now, there's going to be a lot of people with time likely on their hands to be able to listen to more podcasts.
Yeah.
or there might be an opportunity to acquire a competitor at like
Mm-hmm.
10 cents on the dollar. Or like, again, I've got some clients with very, very expensive pieces of machinery.
Mm-hmm.
And, if some of your, they don't necessarily have to even be competitors. They're just people who need that kind of machinery. But if you notice that there's an industry where they're going to be particularly hard hit, you may be able to acquire some of those really expensive pieces of equipment for 1/100th on the dollar. And again, to the bold will go the spoils. In this time of turmoil, I think it's the ones who look beyond the immediate challenge and the immediate noise, of which there can be a lot, and look beyond to say, let's assume we're going to come out of this okay,
Mm-hmm.
and there's going to be even more opportunity for my business. So how can I take advantage of this situation to better position me for wherever we end up next?
Yeah.
And it takes, that's again, showing up in the office. I talked about, leaders setting the tone and bringing conscious choice to that. It also takes like a lot of mental effort to pause in the middle of this crisis change and say, but there is going to be opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
and let's go look at them. So, at the end of the day, it's don't panic. Like,
Mm-hmm.
somehow, we will all get through this. I don't know what it will look. I can't say for a given business whether you'll survive or fail. That's very, very specific to a business. Um, I do know that life will go on, and some of my emails to people today is just, hug your family, stay close to them, because
Yeah.
come hell or high water, they'll still be there, right? And remember what's really important.
Yeah, this may even just be the slowdown that everyone needs to reconnect with their families and their loved ones too. And I want to go back on a conversation a little bit here, and you kind of glazed over it a little bit, and I was waiting to bring this up. I want to talk about what it was like as a business owner, being on a sailboat with your kids and working as you guys were traveling around the world. I think that something that I need to bring up, and we just got to dive into that a little bit here. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So for 2 years, my wife and I lived on a sailboat in the Mediterranean
Mhm.
and homeschooled our 3 kids. Now, my wife wasn't working at the time, and it was during the dot-com meltdown. So really, I was not doing very much work. I was doing a lot of outreach and staying in touch with a lot of people.
Mhm.
And I did keep I wrote an online diary because blogging hadn't yet been invented,
Mhm.
but I basically created the equivalent of a blog that tracked our whole adventure. And what was interesting, that was another big downturn in the industry where I've spent most of my time, which is high
Mhm.
tech. And when I came back after 2 years, people said to me, David, in the last 2 years, you're like the only positive news that I had.
Interesting.
And so that was, it really positioned me, like people wanted to talk to me
Yeah.
when I came back, and things were picking up because they'd had this positive experience from me for 2 years.
Yeah.
Uh, so, and, just keeping a boat moving, the, there's just so many aspects to running a sailboat that your kids
Mhm.
become part of, whether that's where are we going to go next, the navigation for that.
Mhm.
Then it's the wind forecasting, like to keep the boat safe. So you may have decided, a couple days ago that we're going to go to ABC, but if this morning we get up and the wind is way too strong and coming directly from the direction of where ABC is, it's probably, the choices are probably better to stay put
Yeah.
or go pick a DEF,
Right.
whatever that is. Sailing is about, you can sail upwind, but it's really hard work and it's
Mhm.
really slow. And sometimes it's just a lot easier to see which way the wind wants to blow you and go follow that.
Yeah, I can imagine there was a lot of life lessons learned out of those 2 years, being at sea together as a family. What would you say have been the biggest things for your kids, have being homeschooled for 2 years and being with you guys on such an adventure? What were some of the best things that came out of that for them?
What I've seen with them is that they come from a very grounded place. They know who they are because they spent 2 years. We did 18 months without being in an English-speaking country.
Mhm.
We're 2 years away from media, from what's the popular song, what's the popular television show. Um, and so they figured out a lot more about who they were as people
Mm.
without outside influences, like, just family. And then we did meet up with some other traveling families from time to time. And I think it gave them a level of confidence, belief in themselves. And so I find that they, relative to their peers of the same age, they're more mature, they're more forward looking. I mean, they're now in their 20s and 30s, but I just see this show up in a lot of consistent ways. And then, even in the current crisis we're in, the discussions tend to be much more global in scale.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just, even just not looking, you and I are talking in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot happening south of the border of us in the United States. And because our economies are tightly linked, it'll have a big impact on us. And I still find with my kids, we're still like talking about what's happening in Europe.
Right.
And my kids have also traveled in Asia. So we almost automatically talk in a more global perspective.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you just have this different viewpoint of the world, having traveled and lived in Mediterranean Europe for 2 years.
Yeah. I love that. And how about you for in business? Were there any of those things that you learned while you were on the sailboat with the family brought back and really implemented into business growth and strategies that you use with your clients now?
Some is definitely just resiliency. Like when you're in a sailboat and you're in the middle of the Adriatic Sea in the middle of the night, and there's a 75-mile wide thunderstorm in front of you, like the lives of the people most important to your life are at stake. So like there aren't many times in business where the stakes are that high, unless you're in healthcare or in medical supplies or pharma, but it's pretty rare and so that helps me keep decisions right-sized. Sometimes I'll even say to entrepreneurs, like, no one will die because we make the wrong decision here.
Right.
Like, let's right size what it is that we're deciding. So there's some resiliency. And then, there is a lot of metaphors. The way you travel on the ocean in a slow boat, which is what a sailboat is it only travels at about 7 miles an hour, or 10 kilometers an hour. So that's pretty slow. You could run about that fast if you're fit. Is you need a vision for where you're going. So we had this vision of basically covering most of the Mediterranean, and so you might have a vision in 3 weeks. We want to go to this country from the country we're in. But then you have to break it down into all the intermediate steps. And that's why I'm this big believer in a framework that I use, asks you to look out like 3 to 6 years where you want to go with your business and get clear, like, where are you generally trying to point the ship? And then in 1 year, like, clearly where you need to be in 1 year so that you can get to where you want to go in 3 or 6. And then everything really becomes about the next quarter. And that's in a sailboat. The sailing analogy is like your next waypoint, your next place where you're going to do a turn. So for people who understand something about boating and about routing and planning, those can be really useful analogies.
Yeah.
And so I sometimes use that in my work as well.
I love it. And The Wind in Your Sails is clearly a great title for your book.
And the book is not about sailing. It's about my business. But every single chapter is a sailing story that I think illustrates the topic that I'm trying to get across in the chapter.
Yeah, I love it. It's great. It's a great read. Well, David, thank you so much for bringing your knowledge and expertise and all your many years of business expertise, and really just shedding some light on like how to be a great leader, how to rise up in a crisis situation, and that we're in globally at the moment. And in any situation that arises in your life, you can apply these same principles to business life, personal life, family situations. So I really want to thank you for coming today on to Amplify You and sharing your extreme knowledge with us. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been fabulous.
Yeah, that's awesome. And where can we find out more information about you, David? Where would you like our listeners to follow you along your journey?
Probably easiest is my website, coachdjgreer.com, and it's for my two initials, David James. And from there, I have links to all of my social media.
Perfect.
And every page has my email address and my phone number. So it's easy. So call or write. I would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Yeah, I love it. So give David some love and go follow him. Send him a message. And thanks again, David, for being with us. We hope to have you back again sometime.